Good afternoon. This is Pamela, and you are listening to Watchman on the Pod. I'm going to continue in my book reading of The Secret History of the Jesuits by Edmond Paris. We are on chapter 6, and this is considered section 2, and that is entitled The Jesuits in Europe in the 16th and 17th century. Chapter 6, Italy, Portugal, and Spain. France, wrote Mr. Boheimer, is the cradle of the Society of Jesus, but in Italy it received its program and constitution. Therefore, in Italy it first took root, and from there it spread abroad. The author notes the increasing number of colleges, 128, and Jesuit academics, 1680. But, says he, the history of the Italian civilization during the 16th and 17th century shows the result of it most strikingly. If a well-learned Italy thus embraced again the faith and ordinances of the Church, received a new zeal for asceticism and missions, composed again pious poems and hymns for the Church, dedicated conscientiously the painter's brush and sculptor's chisel to exalt the religious ideal, it is not because the cultivated classes were instructed in Jesuits' colleges and confessionals. Question mark. I read that kind of in the wrong way, I think. All right. Gone were childish simplicity, joy, vivacity, and the simple love of nature. The Jesuits' pupils are far too clerical, devout, absorbed to preserve these qualities. They are taken up with ecstatic visions and illuminations. They literally get drunk with the paintings of frightful mortifications and the martyrs' atrocious torments. They need the pomp, glittering, and theatrical. From the end of the 16th century and on, Italian art and literature produce faithfully this moral transformation. The restlessness, the ostentation, the shocking claim which characterized the creations of that period promote a feeling of repulsion instead of sympathy for the beliefs they are supposed to interpret and glorify. It is the marked sui generis of the company. This love for the distorted, finicky, glittering, theatrical, could seem strange amongst mystics formed by the spiritual exercises, if we did not detect in it this essentially Jesuitical aim to impress the mind. It is an application of the maxim, the end justifies the means, applied with perseverance by the Jesuits in the arts, literature, as well as political and morals. Italy had been hardly touched by the Reformation. Nevertheless, the Waldenses, who had survived since the Middle Ages in spite of persecution, and established themselves in the north and south of the peninsula, joined the Calvinistic Church in 1532. On a report from the Jesuit Pasanivino, Emmanuel Philibert of Suavai launched another bloody persecution against his heretic subjects in 1561. The same thing happened in Calabria, at Castel di San Sisto, and Guardia Fiscal. The Jesuits were implicated in these massacres. They were busy converting victims. As for Father Pasfino, he followed the Catholic army as their chaplain and recommended the extermination by fire of the heretic pastors as a necessary and holy act. The Jesuits were all-powerful in Parma, at the court of the Farnese, as well as in Naples during the 16th and 17th centuries. But in Venice, where they had been loaded with favors, they were banished on the 14th of May in 1606 as the most faithful servants and spokesmen of the Pope. They were nevertheless allowed to return in 1656. But their influence in the Republic was not to be from now on but a shadow of the one that had been in the past. Portugal was a choice country for the order. Already under John III, 1521 and 1559, it was the most powerful religious community in the kingdom. Its influence grew even more after the Revolution of 1640, which put the Braganza on the throne. Under the first king of the House of Braganza, Father Fernandez was a member of the government, and under the minority of Alphonse VI, the counselor most heeded by the regent Queen Louise. Father de Ville was successful in overthrowing Alphonse VI in 1667, and Father Emmanuel Fernandez was made a deputy to the Cortes in 1667 by the new King Peter II. In spite of the fact that the fathers were not fulfilling any public duty in the kingdom, they were more powerful in Portugal than in any other country. Not only were they spiritual advisors to all the royal family, but the king, his master, consulted them. Oh, wait a minute. But his king, let's see. I'm sorry, let me go back to that sentence again. Not only were they spiritual advisors to all the royal family, but the king and his minister consulted them in all important circumstances. From one of their own testimonies, we know that one place in the administration of the state and church could be obtained without their consent, so much so that the clergy, the high classes, and the people contended with each other to win their favor and approval. Foreign politics were also under their influence. Any sensible man would see that such a state of affairs was unprofitable to the good of the kingdom. In fact, we can see the results by the decadent state into which this unfortunate land fell. All the energy and perspicacity of the Mark of Pombal in the middle of the 18th century were needed to tear Portugal out of the order's deadly grasp. In Spain, the order's penetration was slower. The higher clergy and the Domitians opposed it for a long time. The sovereigns themselves, Charles V and Philip II, while accepting their services, trusted the soldiers of the Pope and feared encroachments on their authority. But with much craftiness, the order eventually defeated this resistance. During the 17th century, they are all powerful in Spain, among the high classes and at court. Even Father Neidhart, former German cavalry officer, fully governed the kingdom as counselor of state, prime minister, and grand inquisitor. In Spain, as in Portugal, the kingdom's ruin coincided with the rise of the order. This is what Edgar Quinet had to say about it. Wherever a dynasty dies, I can see, rising up and standing behind her, a kind of bad genie, one of those dark figures that are the confessors, gently and parentally luring her towards death. Indeed, one cannot impute Spain's decadence to this order only. Nevertheless, it is true that the Company of Jesus, together with the Church and other religious orders, hastened her fall. The richer the order became, the poorer Spain was, so much so that when Charles II died, the state's coffers did not even contain the necessary amount to pay for 10,000 masses usually said for the salvation of a deceased monarch's soul. Chapter 7. Germany. It was not southern Europe, but Central Europe, France, Holland, Germany, Poland, which were the site for that historical struggle between Catholicism and Protestantism. So these countries were the main fields of battle for the Society of Jesus. The situation was particularly grave in Germany. Not only notorious pessimists, but also thinking and wise Catholics considered the old church's cause in all Germany land as almost lost. In fact, even in Austria and Bohemia, the break with Rome was so general that the Protestants could reasonably hope to conquer Austria within a few decades. Then how is it this change did not take place and the country was divided into two sections instead? The Catholic party at the close of the 16th century had no hesitation in answering this question, for it always acknowledged that the Wittelsbach, Habsburg, and Jesuits were responsible for this happy turn of events. Rene Fulop Miller wrote about the Jesuits' role in these events. Quote, "The Catholic cause could hope for a real success only if the fathers were able to influence and guide the princes at all times and in all circumstances. The confessional offered the Jesuits the means to secure a lasting political influence, therefore an effectual action." In Bavaria, the young Duke Albert V, son of the zealous Catholic and educated at Ingolstadt, the old Catholic city, called on the Jesuits to combat effectively the heresy. On the 7th of July, 1556, 8 fathers and 12 Jesuit teachers entered Ingolstadt. It was the start of a new era for Bavaria. The state itself received a new seal. The Roman Catholic conceptions directed the politics of princes and the behavior of the high classes. But this new spirit got hold of the higher classes also. It did not gain the hearts of ordinary people. Nevertheless, under the iron discipline of the state and the restored church, they again became devout Catholics, docile, fanatic, and intolerant toward any heresy. It may seem excessive to attribute such prodigies, virtues, and actions to a mere handful of strangers. Yet, in these circumstances, their force was in inverse ratio to their numbers, and they were immediately effective, as no obstacles were met. Loyola emissaries won the country's heart and mind from the start. From the next generation on, Ingolstadt became the perfect type of the German Jesuit city. One can judge the state of mind the fathers introduced to this stronghold of faith by reading the following. The Jesuit Mayhofer of Ingolstadt taught in his Preacher's Mirror, "We will not be judged if we demand the killing of Protestants any more than we would be asking for the death penalty on thieves, murderers, counterfeiters, and revolutionaries." The successor of Albert V, and especially Maximilian I, 1597 to 1651, completed his work. But Albert V already was conscientious in his duty of assuring his subjects salvation. As soon as the fathers arrived in Bavaria, his attitude towards Protestants and those favorably to them became more severe. From 1563 on, he pitilessly expelled all recalcitrants and had no mercy for the Anabaptists who had to suffer drownings, fire, prison, and chains, all of which were praised by the Jesuit Arcola. In spite of all this, the whole generation of men had to disappear before the persecution was crowned a complete success. As late as 1586, the Moravian Anabaptists managed to hide 600 victims from the Duke Guillemon. This one example proves that there were thousands, not hundreds, who were driven out an awful breach into a thinly populated country. "But," said Albert V to the Munich City Council, "God's honor and the salvation of souls must be placed above temporal interests." Unquote. Little by little, all teaching in Bavaria was placed in the Jesuits' hands, and that the land became the base for their penetration in eastern, western, and northern Germany. From 1585 on, the fathers converted the part of Westphalia depending on Cologne. In 1586, they appeared in Neuss and Bonn, one of Cologne's archbishop's residences. They opened colleges at Heidelsheim in 1587, Munster in 1588. This particular one already had 1,300 pupils in 1618. A large part of the Western Germany was reconquered in that way by Catholicism, thanks to the Wittelsbach and Jesuits. The alliance between the Wittelsbach and Jesuits was maybe even more important for the Austrian lands than for Western Germany. The Archduke Charles of Citter, last son of Emperor Ferdinand, married in 1571 a Bavarian princess who brought into Gratz Castle the narrow Catholic tendencies and the friendship for the Jesuits which prevailed at the court of Munich. Under her influence, Charles worked hard to extirpate the heresy from his kingdom, and when he died in 1590, he made his son and successor, Ferdinand, swear that he would go on with his work. In any case, Ferdinand was well prepared for this. For 5 years he had been a pupil of the Jesuits at Ingolstadt. Besides, he was so narrow-minded that, to him, there was no nobler task than the re-establishment of the Catholic Church in his hereditary states. That this task was adventurous or not to his lands, or was advantageous or not to his lands, was of no concern to him. "I prefer," said he, "to reign over a country in ruins than over one which is damned." In 1617, the Archduke Ferdinand was crowned King of Bohemia by the Emperor. Influenced by his Jesuit confessor Villers, Ferdinand started at once to combat Protestantism in his new kingdom. This signaled the start of that bloody war of religion which for the next 30 years kept Europe in suspense. When, in 1618, the unhappy events in Prague gave the signal for open rebellion, the old Emperor Matthias tried at first to compromise, but he did not have enough power to make his intentions prevail against King Ferdinand, who was dominated by his Jesuit confessor. So the last hope to settle this conflict amicably was lost. At the same time, the lands of Bohemia had taken special measures and solemnly decreed that all Jesuits should be expelled, as they saw in them promoters of civil war. Soon after, Moravia and Silesia followed this example, and Protestants of Hungary, where the Jesuits Parmenides ruled with a rod of iron, rebelled also. But the Battle of the White Mountain, 1620, was won by Ferdinand, who had been made emperor again after the death of Matthias. The Jesuits pursued Ferdinand to inflict the most cruel punishment on the rebels. Protestantism was rooted out of the whole country by means too terrible for words. At the end of the war, the country's material ruin was complete. The Jesuit Balbinus, Bohemia's historian, wondered how there could still be some inhabitants left in that country. But moral ruin was even more terrible. The flourishing culture found amongst the nobles and middle classes, the rich national literature which could not be replaced, all this had been destroyed, and even nationality had been abolished. Bohemia was open to the Jesuits' activities, and they burned Czech literature en masse under their influence. Even the name of the nation's great saint, John Huss, gradually grew dimmer until it was extinct in the hearts of the people. The height of the Jesuits' power, said Tomic, coincided with the country's great decadence in her national culture. It is because of the influence that order had that this unfortunate land's awakening came about 1 century too late. When the 30-Year War came to an end and a peace was concluded assuring German Protestants the same political rights enjoyed by the Catholics, the Jesuits did their uttermost to continue the fighting. It was in vain. But they obtained from their student Leopold I, then reigning emperor, the promise to persecute the Protestants in his own lands, especially in Hungary. Escorted by imperial dragoons, the Jesuits undertook this work of conversion in 1671. The Hungarians rose to action and started a war which was to last for nearly a whole generation. But that insurrection was victorious under the leadership of Francis Kaukaski. The victor wanted to drive the Jesuits out of all the countries which fell under his power, but influential protectors of the order managed to adjourn these measures, and the expulsion did not take place until 1707. Prince Eugene blamed with a harsh frankness the politics of the imperial house and intrigues of the Jesuits in Hungary. He wrote, Austria nearly lost Hungary because of the persecuting of the Protestants. One day he bitterly exclaimed that the morals of the Turks were far superior to those of the Jesuits, in practice at least. Not only do they want to dominate consciences, but also to have the right of life and death over men. Austria and Bavaria reaped the fruits of Jesuit domination in full. The compression of all progressive tendencies and the systematic stultification of the people. The deep misery which followed the war of religion, the powerless politics, the intellectual decadence, the moral corruption, a frightful decrease in the population, and impoverishment of the whole of Germany. These were the results of the order's actions. Chapter 8. Switzerland. It was only during the 17th century that the Jesuits established themselves successfully in Switzerland. After having been called, then banished, by a few cities of the Confederation during the second half of the 16th century. The Archbishop of Milan, Charles Borromei, who had favored their installation at Lucerne in 1578, soon realized that the results of their actions would be, as we are reminded by J. Huber, quote, Charles Borromei wrote to his confessor that the Company of Jesus, governed by heads more political than religious, is becoming too powerful to preserve the necessary moderation and submission. She rules over kings and princes and governs temporal and spiritual affairs. The pious institution has lost the spirit which animated her originally. We shall be compelled to abolish it. Unquote. At the same time in France, the famous legal expert Etienne Pasquier wrote, Introduce this order in our midst, and at the same time you will introduce dissension, chaos, and confusion. Unquote. Is not this identical complaint heard over and over in all countries against the company? It was the same in Switzerland when the evidence of her evil deeds broke through the flattering appearances with which she excelled in covering herself. Wherever the Jesuits managed to take root, they seduced great and small, young and old. Very soon the authorities would start consulting them in important circumstances. Their donations started flowing in, and it was not long before they occupied all the schools, the pupils of most churches, the confessionals of all high-ranking and influential people. Confessors looking after the education of all classes of society, counselors and intimate friends of members of the council, their influence grew day after day, and they did not wait long before exercising it in public affairs. Lucerne and Freiburg were their main centers, and from there they conducted the exterior politics of most Catholic cantons. Any plan forged in Rome or by other foreign powers against Protestantism in Switzerland was assured of the Jesuits' full support. In 1620 they were successful in making the Catholic population of Veltlin rise against the Protestants, and they slaughtered 600. The Pope gave indulgence to all those who took part in that horrible deed. In 1656, they kindled civil war between members of the various confessions. Later again, a new war of religion was started by the Jesuits. In 1712, peace was being discussed in Aarau, Lucerne, and Uri had just accepted it when the Jesuits, on an order from Rome, did all they could to reverse things. In 1712, peace was being discussed in Aru. Oh, I just read that. I'm sorry. I'll read it again. Lutheran and Uri had just accepted it when the Jesuits, on an order from Rome, did all they could to reverse things. They refused absolution to all those who would hesitate to take up arms. They proclaimed loudly from their pulpits that one was not obliged to keep his word when it was given to heretics. They made moderate counselors to suspect, tried to remove them from their posts, and provoked in Lucerne such a threatening uprising of the people among the governments that the supreme authority resigned herself to break the peace. The Catholics were defeated in the fight which followed and signed an onerous peace. Since that time, the order's influence in Switzerland became smaller and smaller. Today, Article 51 of the Swiss Constitution forbids the Society of Jesus to hold any cultural or educative activity on the territory of the Confederation, and efforts made to abolish this rule have been defeated. Chapter 9. Poland and Russia. Jesuit domination was nowhere as deadly as it was in Poland. This is proved by H. Boehmer, a moderate historian who does not bear any systematic hostility towards the society. Quote, the Jesuits were entirely responsible for Poland's annihilation. The accusation so worded is excessive. The decadence of the Polish state had started before they came on the scene, but they undoubtedly hastened the kingdom's decomposition. Of all the states, Poland, who had millions of Orthodox Christians in her midst, should have had religious tolerance as one of the most essential principles of her interior politics. The Jesuits did not allow that. They did worse. They put Poland's exterior politics at the service of Catholic interest in a fatal manner. Unquote. This was written at the end of the last century, and it is very similar to what Colonel Beck, the former Polish Foreign Affairs Minister from 1932 to 1939, said after the 1939-1945 war. The Vatican is one of the main causes of the tragedy of my country. I realized too late that we had pursued our foreign politics just to serve the interest of the Catholic Church. So with several centuries in between, the same disastrous influence has again made its mark on that unfortunate nation. In 1581, Father Passavino, pontifical legate in Moscow, has done his best to bring together the Tsar Ivan the Terrible and the Roman Church. Ivan was not strictly against it. Full of glad hopes, Passavino made himself, in 1584, the mediator of the Peace of Kharkov between Russia and Poland, a peace which saved Ivan from inextricable difficulties. This is just what the crafty sovereign had hoped for. There was no more talk of converting the Russians. Passavino had to leave Russia without having obtained anything. 2 years later, an even better opportunity offered itself to the fathers to get a hold on Russia. Grishika Osterpu, an unfrocked monk, revealed to a Jesuit that he actually was Dmitri, son of Tsar Ivan, who had been assassinated. He declared himself ready to subdue Moscow for Rome if he was master of the Tsar's throne. Without thinking it over first, the Jesuits took it into their own hands to introduce Osterpu to the Palatine of Sandomir, who gave him his daughter in marriage. They spoke on his behalf to King Sigismund III, and the Pope, regarding his expectations, had succeeded in making the Polish army rise against the Tsar, Boris Godunov. As a reward for this service, the false Dmitri renounced the religion of his fathers at Krasakovi, one of the Jesuits' houses, and promised the order an establishment in Moscow, near the Kremlin, after his victory over Boris. But it was these favors from the Catholics which unleashed the hatred of the Russian Orthodox Church against Dmitri. On the 27th of May, 1606, he was massacred with several hundred Polish followers. Until then, one could hardly speak of a Russian national sentiment, but now this feeling was very strong and took immediately the form of a fanatical hatred for the Roman Church and Poland. The alliance with Austria and the offensive politics of Sigismund III against the Turks, all of which were strongly encouraged by the order, were just as disastrous for Poland. To put it briefly, no other state suffered as much as Poland did under the Jesuits' domination, and in no other country apart from Portugal was the society so powerful. Not only did Poland have a king of the Jesuits, but also a Jesuit king, John Casimir, a sovereign who had belonged to the order before his ascension to the throne in 1649. While Poland was heading fast towards ruin, the number of Jesuit establishments and schools were growing so fast that the general made Poland into a special congregation in 1751. And I'm going to end that there, brothers and sisters. That's a lot of information. I know that it is, but it's historical, it's facts, it's things that we need to know and understand who these Jesuits are that is ruling and behind the Pope of Rome. I love you all so very, very much. Keep your eyes on Jesus, your nose in the book, which is the Word of God, and embed the Word of God upon the tablets of your hearts, so you will not sin against God. Be blessed, brothers and sisters. I love you all so very, very much. Bye-bye.